Israel is currently preparing for a full-scale assault and invasion into Lebanese territory in order to incapacitate Hezbollah. In this video, I'm going to share with you my detailed analysis as to why I think the Israelis are going to soon go ahead with their planned invasion, and why this invasion could have very serious consequences for global financial markets. Since October of last year, I've done over 100 hours of research on this topic, which I have been sharing with my subscribers. But now, I'm ready to share my views with the general public. In the first part of this video, I'm going to describe why I think Israel is about to invade Lebanon. And the second part of the video, I'm going to describe what the consequences of this invasion may be for financial markets. I have 5 major reasons why I think Israel is about to launch an invasion into Lebanon at some point during the next few months. The first reason is pretty obvious. In the last month, over 1,000 rockets, missiles, and drones have been launched from Lebanese territory into northern Israel. The constant barrage of rocket attacks has damaged homes, businesses, government installations. It's caused forest fires. It's caused injuries and death. This has caused life to become essentially unlivable in various areas in northern Israel. And as a result, somewhere between 60,000 and 80,000 Israelis have been forced to evacuate the area, abandon their homes, abandon their livelihoods, and become refugees. This is exactly what Hezbollah's strategy is. They have said in public that their goal is to make life unlivable for Israelis. Their strategy is to bombard them, to attack them, to terrorize them until they run them out of the land of Israel. That is their stated objective. And what we're seeing in northern Israel is just the first taste of what is Hezbollah's overall strategy for the entirety of Israel. Israeli officials, particularly in the intelligence and defense establishments, understand that this is Hezbollah's strategy. They understand that they have a religious commitment to wiping Israel off the map. This is a goal that they're never going to relinquish. So the Israelis understand that they cannot allow this existential enemy to sit behind the Lebanese borders and just launch thousands of missiles into Israel, making life impossible to live in Israel. Israel is going to have to respond, is going to have to invade Lebanon in order to go after Hezbollah and incapacitate them from continuing to terrorize them. Because right now, Hezbollah is only able to terrorize northern Israel. But it's Hezbollah's goal to be able to terrorize all of Israel. They are actively trying to acquire technology that will enable them to have longer range missiles that can reach any place in Israel, and to have guided missile technology that will enable them to accurately hit targets. Right now, Hezbollah has somewhere between 100 and 200,000 rockets at their disposal to just launch into Israel. But the majority of these rockets are very short range, and they are very inaccurate because they're not guided. The technology that would enable these rockets to have accuracy through guiding systems is actually quite available out there in the market. And they're actively trying to acquire it, and sooner or later they will acquire it. Israel knows this. So they know that they need to go after Hezbollah before they acquire the type of technology that will enable them to terrorize the entirety of Israel. The second reason that I think that Israel is going to be invading Lebanon is also pretty obvious. Israel's been telegraphing this. In the last month, there have been stories all over the Israeli media quoting politicians and various officials about plans that are in place to invade Lebanon. Just a couple of days ago, a top Israeli general sent out a warning to the population of southern Lebanon that they needed to evacuate the area because Israel was about to strike the area with a strength that they had never seen before. These are not empty threats. The Israelis are preparing global public opinion, and they're also trying to warn the civilian population of southern Lebanon to evacuate because they want to avoid civilian casualties when they move in strongly into Lebanon. The third reason that I believe Israel is going to invade Lebanon is something that I alluded to earlier, and it just has to do with timing. The Israelis understand that Hezbollah sooner or later is going to acquire the type of technology that will enable them to terrorize the entirety of Israel. So from a timing standpoint, Israel knows that it is facing an existential confrontation with Hezbollah. Right now is a better time for Israel to confront Hezbollah than later. Hezbollah later is going to be able to inflict far heavier damage on Israel than it can right now. So since the Israelis have pretty much decided that a confrontation with Hezbollah is inevitable, they understand that the time to have that confrontation with Hezbollah is right now and not later. My fourth reason for believing that Israel is going to invade Lebanon is somewhat more controversial, but after dozens of hours of research and careful consideration, I've come to the conclusion that one of the main factors that's going to be driving the Israeli invasion of Lebanon is that they need to set the stage for a confrontation with Iran. Now, let me explain what Iran has to do with this. The Israelis, I believe, at the top levels of their government and their defense establishment, have decided that a direct confrontation with Iran is inevitable. And so for them, the only question right now is regards to timing. Why have the Israelis decided that they have to confront Iran directly? The first reason is that Iran is financing, it's ideologically supporting, it's arming Israel's existential enemies right at their border and even within their borders. The Israelis know that as long as the Islamic Republic of Iran is ruled by the Ayatollahs, they will never stop supporting Israel's existential enemies, and therefore Israel will never have peace. The second reason that Israel has decided that they must confront Iran directly and that they must do it now has to do with Iran's nuclear program. Iran's defense and intelligence establishment is convinced that sooner or later Iran will acquire a nuclear weapon. And the only way that they believe that they can prevent this is through military action. Israel has already warned many times over the years that they would never allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. And they're not kidding. The issue is that Iran is about to acquire a nuclear weapon. Just recently, the International Atomic Agency announced that Iran has violated international agreements by purifying uranium beyond a certain point. What this means is that Iran is very, very close to acquiring a nuclear weapon. This means that Israel right now has a very short window of time in which it can stop Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Now, you may be asking, what does this have to do with Lebanon? Lebanon becomes a crucial aspect of this situation. The Israelis believe that they have to set the stage for an attack or a direct attack on Iran. They want to attack Iran only in a situation in which the Israelis, are seen as performing a defensive action rather than as an offensive action. So they believe that in going in and attacking Lebanon and going after Hezbollah, which is the intimate proxy of Iran, they have a very, very close political and religious alliance. They do believe that the Iranians are going to step up their activity in Lebanon. They're going to step up their activity in support of Hezbollah. They're going to support Hezbollah to acquire technology which the Iranians already have that will enable Hezbollah to fire missiles deep into Israel. Just a couple of days ago, reports emerged that Iran may be shipping sophisticated weapons into Lebanon in order to help Hezbollah. Iran may send military advisors from their Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Iran can do a number of things to try to indirectly help Hezbollah. Now, it's also true that the relationship between Hezbollah and Iran is so close that Iran may actually decide to intervene directly. Now, either way, whether Iran intervenes directly or indirectly, this is going to give Israel the justification that they need to attack Iran directly. Israel doesn't want to attack Iran seeming like it's the aggressor. It needs support from the international community, and in particular, it needs the support of the United States. Israel can't take on Iran without international support, particularly from the United States. The Israelis consider it essential that their attack on Iran be perceived as defensive and as the response to an Iranian aggression on the Israelis. And so that's what I mean when I say that invading Lebanon is going to enable them to set the stage for an eventual attack on Iran, one that will at least have the support of its allies and especially the United States. Now, my fifth set of reasons for why I think Israel is going to be invading Lebanon fairly soon is much more controversial, more subtle, and you'll just have to decide for yourself if you agree with me. This particular set of reasons is really divided into two parts. They both have to do with the U.S. presidential elections. In other words, the timing of the Israeli invasion of Lebanon is actually linked to the U.S. presidential election. Now, the first part of this reason has nothing to do with Israel per se. It has to do with Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin believes that his conflict with Ukraine, the war with Ukraine, represents an existential threat to Russia. Russia needs to bring to an end this conflict that they have with Ukraine because it's draining Russia's financial resources, economic resources, human resources. It's isolated them in the world. They need to bring this conflict to an end. And they believe that the best way that they'll be able to bring this conflict to an end on terms that's favorable to Russia is if Donald Trump is elected president of the United States. And the best thing that Russia can do to try to help Donald Trump to win the election and to defeat Joe Biden is to do something that would cause global oil prices to spike, for U.S. oil prices to rise, for inflation to reaccelerate, which is something that we all know almost any U.S. president that is experiencing a large amount of inflation at the time of an election is likely to lose the election. And the Russians understand that very clearly. So for the Russians, if they can actually provoke a rise in oil prices that will cause a rise of gas prices to rise in the United States and for inflation to accelerate, they believe that it's far more likely that Joe Biden will lose. And that's something that they very, very much want. Now, what does Lebanon have to do with this? The Lebanon situation right now is the best lever that Putin can use right now to try to create a conflict in the Middle East that will cause oil prices to spike. What can Vladimir Putin do? What I alluded to earlier. Vladimir Putin has the ability directly through Russian intelligence or through his ally, which is Iran, to get the sort of technology to Hezbollah that's guided missile systems and missiles that are longer range, so that Hezbollah is able to strike deeply into Israel and with accuracy. Putin knows very well that if Hezbollah is able to pull off successful strikes deep into Israeli territory with accuracy, this will absolutely ensure a horrific type of response from Israel in terms of an invasion into Lebanon to try to get Hezbollah. It will also vastly increase the probabilities of a direct confrontation between Iran and Israel. In fact, Israel has already warned Iran that if the Iranians give Hezbollah technology that enables Hezbollah to strike Israel deep in its territory with accuracy, that they are going to hold the Iranians responsible for any such attacks that happen in Israel. So Israel has already prepared the ground for a direct confrontation with Iran if Hezbollah strikes Israel with sophisticated weapons that they acquired from Iran. Now, Vladimir Putin has it in his power to make sure that this technology gets into the hands of Hezbollah. And he knows that if he's able to pull this lever, this basically is going to create a regional war in the Middle East. And for reasons that I'll explain later, that will cause global oil prices to spike, and it'll make it far more likely that Joe Biden will lose the election. Now, here's the second factor that's related to the U.S. election, and it's a lot more subtle. The Israelis want to force the hand of Joe Biden. I don't believe that the Israelis have any desire to interfere with U.S. elections like Vladimir Putin does, but they're going to act in their own national best interest. And they believe that by invading Lebanon at this particular time, it is going to force the hand of Joe Biden. Joe Biden is going to have to decide whether he's going to strongly support the Israelis in this invasion, or if he's going to waffle, or if he might even withhold support. In that event, Joe Biden has a lot to lose. He could lose one of the most important voting blocks and one of the most important sources of finance for the Democratic Party for the upcoming elections. The Jewish vote in the United States may be small in terms of numbers, but it's actually large enough of a bloc that it could actually turn the result of elections in swing states. Their financial support of either Biden or Trump can also be a critical swing factor. And the Israelis know this. The Israelis also know that for Americans over the age of 40, there's an overwhelming support for Israel. So if Joe Biden starts waffling with regards to Israel, he may even lose some centrist Democrats, some quote unquote blue dog Democrats. He may lose independents that may actually, as a result of this issue, shift their potential votes from Joe Biden to Donald Trump, who is perceived as a much, much stronger ally of Israel. Now, on the other hand, let's suppose that Joe Biden doesn't waffle and that he actually gives his full-hearted support to Israel. Well, then Israel wins. So it's actually a win-win situation for Israel right now to push Joe Biden to make a commitment. Either he makes a strong commitment, in that case, it's great for Israel, or Joe Biden waffles. And if he waffles, Joe Biden may very well lose the election based on that decision alone. And from the Israeli standpoint, that's not such a bad deal because they know that as far as they're concerned, Donald Trump is a far stronger ally to Israel than Joe Biden is. So it would be helping Trump in that it would energize his base. It would also very likely cause him to lose a strong voter base, which is the Jewish vote. It would also cause him to lose independent and centrist votes. He's got a lot to lose there, which would potentially cause him to lose the elections. The Israelis know this, and they want to force his hand to either supporting them strongly or risk losing the election, which is something that would actually favor the Israelis in the long run. Another thing's going to happen if Joe Biden waffles is that this is going to massively energize one of Trump's most solid basis of support, which is with evangelicals. There's almost no issue that's more important for evangelicals than support for Israel. And this will massively energize them if Joe Biden decides to waffle on this subject of support for Israel. The bottom line here is that by forcing Joe Biden's hand, Israel places itself in a win-win situation. So let's briefly recap where we are in the analysis right now. I've gone over a number of reasons why I think that it's highly probable that Israel is going to invade Lebanon. And I've also gone over why I think that an Israeli invasion of Lebanon is almost inevitably going to result in a direct confrontation between Iran and Israel. So this leads into the second part of the video, which is what is the impact of all this going to be on financial markets? A war between Israel and Iran would provoke a massive spike in global oil prices. And I'm going to tell you two reasons why. The first reason is the less important one, which is that Iran supplies somewhere between 1.5 million and 2 million barrels a day to the global oil market. Withdrawing that oil supply would likely cause oil prices to rise significantly, probably to about the $100 level, particularly given the low level of inventories and the tightness of global markets during the next few months, as I pointed out in other videos. Now, the second reason is far more important, which is that if there's a war between Israel and Iran, the biggest trump card that Iran has in trying to defend itself is to block the Strait of Hormuz. Iran definitely has the capacity to block the Strait of Hormuz and prevent any oil from getting through there. Roughly 20 million barrels a day, or about 20% of the world's oil supply, flows through the Strait of Hormuz. Blocking Strait of Hormuz would cause a massive spike in global oil prices, and it would induce a massive global recession. The type of disruption in global oil supplies that would be created would be far more severe than what happened in 1973 during the Arab oil embargo. And as you may know, the Arab oil embargo caused oil prices to quadruple in price. Now let's reflect for a moment. Why would Iran want to close off the Strait of Hormuz? Well, in the event of a war with Israel, the best way that they would have to be able to defend themselves against superior Israeli firepower is to essentially hold the global economy hostage. By closing the Strait of Hormuz, it would induce one of the worst global recessions in history. And so that would bring to bear massive global pressure for the Israelis to halt attacks on Iran. In other words, Iran has the capacity to blackmail the entire world to get Israel off its back. So I have no doubt that if there were a war between Israel and Iran, Iran will pull this trump card in order to try to defend itself. Now, in accordance with the rest of the analysis in this video, I think that a war between Iran and Israel is quite likely. And if a war between Israel and Iran is likely, then a closing off of the Strait of Hormuz is likely. And if the Strait of Hormuz is closed off, then we're going to get a massive spike in global oil prices. We're going to get a resurgence of inflation, higher interest rates, and we're going to get massive global recession in the United States and all around the world. Global markets are by no means prepared for any of the scenarios that I've outlined in this video. The oil markets are clearly not pricing in this sort of scenario. They're not even pricing in much of a risk premium at this point. Global bond markets are not priced in for a resurgence of inflation. And equity markets are at all-time highs and are clearly not pricing in a recession. So this sort of scenario would very much come as a surprise to the market, and that's why it could create an absolutely devastating disturbance and even crash in global markets. So this concludes my video on the likelihood that Israel is going to invade Lebanon and what the consequences of this would be for the global economy. Now, I actually want to hear your opinion and your views. I often learn a lot by interacting with my readers and with the people that watch my videos. So please make sure to comment with your opinions, your questions. And in addition, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because in the next few days, I'm going to be posting some really interesting videos. And throughout the next few weeks, I'm going to be following this situation in Israel, in Iran, and in the global oil markets pretty closely, because this could be the trigger that could create some massive opportunities for investors and markets if they actually understand what the consequences will be if certain events are triggered.